So how's it going, everyone? Now, before I begin this video, I do want to apologize for the lack of uploads over the past month. Work has been very busy and I've been prioritizing that first over YouTube, so apologies for that. But anyways, let's get into the video. A little over 2 years ago, I made the choice of purchasing the Steam Deck, and it has been a game changer for my gaming sessions on the go. And to be honest with you, I've been having quite a hard time writing a script for this video that wouldn't be just a repeat of my 1 year review. Last year, I praised it for its excellent controller design, great low TDP performance, and fantastic operating system, and all of those opinions haven't really changed a year later. But I also expressed my concerns about its relatively okayish to mediocre performance, worried about how the device would fare in the future when games start demanding more and more power. And a year later, this concern is even more pronounced than I expected. I've never seen such a massive spike in PC requirements in a while over the past year, with games like the new Indiana Jones and Monster Hunter Wilds coming up, demanding quite powerful systems to even just get sub-playable frame rates. So amidst the vast pool of recently released games, how is the Steam Deck holding up in 2025? Especially since we aren't going to be seeing a deck successor anytime soon, is it still worth the price for admission? Let's get into it. Now, as I stated before, not a lot of my opinions have changed on the Steam Deck since the last year. Even after a slew of brand new competitors onto the PC market, the Steam Deck still reigns supreme in just the ergonomics and feel. I really don't think any handheld has come close to the comfort of using this thing for hours on a road trip, and potentially not even the new upcoming Switch 2 could match it. The controller placement is still fantastic, and the dual trackpad design is a game changer for most PC things that I'm honestly shocked that not many other competitors have adopted something similar to this. You also have the excellent operating system that is SteamOS, and it is continuing to improve with some really awesome new features and more support for more games. While you can't beat the universal compatibility of Windows-based handhelds to play any game you want, the lightweight and portable first drive approach of SteamOS just makes it superior for the form factor. There are still things that the OS has that Windows doesn't still, like a proper suspend and resume feature. For what it does, I think that SteamOS is the top of class when it comes to gaming operating systems. Alright, let's next talk about performance. Obviously, we can talk tech specs here, but I already went over the strengths and weaknesses of the Steam Deck's hardware in my previous 1 year review, so in this video instead, I want to run some newer titles that have released basically within the last year that I've been playing recently and just seeing how well they perform on the system. First, let's start with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, easily my favorite fighting game as of recent memory. On the deck, the game in single player mode runs at between 40 to 60 FPS, a lot more often hitting close to that 60 FPS mark for most of the gameplay I tested. It's a shame that we have to run this game at the lowest settings, but even at the lowest settings, this game still looks fantastic, and if you're willing to play through those hiccups of performances during intense scenes, then this is a great fighter to pick up for the Steam Deck. Shadow Generations is up next, which is also not extremely demanding. With just shadows turned to low, ironically, we can easily stay above the 45 to 50 FPS mark for most of the time. I'm honestly not sure why Shadows has such a big impact on performance here, but given the fast-paced nature of Sonic games, this setting does not matter that much. There's not much else to say here. The game runs great and you don't need to compromise much on graphic settings for it to run well. Next, let's talk Ready or Not. Now, this game did release back in 2023, but there were some significant performance issues at launch that basically rendered the game unplayable on the deck. Over a year later, though, with some big updates, and now with true controller support, this game is honestly one of the better performing modern games on the Steam Deck. Even at low settings with FSR on, the game surprisingly feels stable enough to play well. Sure, it doesn't hit that 60 FPS mark, but honestly, for an Unreal Engine game, that's to be expected given the current state of them on the Steam Deck. For the most part, we are basically able to keep above that magical 40 FPS number a lot of the time, meaning that if you do plan to cap your FPS as such on the Steam Deck, which, let's be honest, a lot of the community does, you will have honestly no issues running the game. It's a really good experience in my book, and I highly recommend it. In contrast, though, we have Final Fantasy 16, the latest title in the Final Fantasy series, and personally my game of the year back when it released on the PS5 in 2023. The experience is overall extremely inconsistent from what I've tested. First of all, you basically need frame generation on to bring those gameplay frame rates up, which isn't a good start. But even when enabling all of the FSR and frame gen that you can, the game for a good portion of the experience, especially in dense areas like Rosaria here in the intro, the frame times are just all over the place and it just becomes a very stuttery mess. Now, that performance is not all the time. In more open, less detailed areas, like during the initial combat area in the swamp, we are getting much more acceptable frame rates at around that 40 FPS mark without much hiccups. But regardless of how well this specific section ran, I just feel like the performance overall is just way too inconsistent to be enjoyable to play. Now let's move on to Helldivers 2 here. Now, running this game at medium to low settings, we are able to hit that relatively stable 40 to 45 FPS mark with some dips at 30 FPS, but we are only really able to hit that when we're playing any of the lower tier difficulty missions or if we're playing solo. Because testing anything above level 4, the frame rate drops pretty substantially due to how much stuff, how many enemies spawn in within the area, and just how much stuff can go on. So, yeah, I mean, it's still really awesome to see that this game runs relatively fine on the Steam Deck, but don't expect to play any of the level 9 or level 10 missions on this thing. Finally, let's talk the newest game that's coming up, Monster Hunter Wilds. Now, although this game isn't out yet, they did allow us to download a benchmark, and needless to say, what an absolute mess it is. Even with frame generation on and at the absolute lowest settings, when we get to the actual gameplay itself, we are struggling to even hit a consistent 40 to 45 FPS a lot of the time with frame generation. And especially with how precise the gameplay of Monster Hunter is, that is unacceptable in my book. The benchmark didn't even run for me properly, crashing consistently after the first couple of combat scenes. It's a massive departure compared to how well Worlds and Rise ran. Given the small set of games that I've tested here, I think for right now the Steam Deck is still good enough for at least a little while. A third of the games here, in my eyes, were unplayable, which is still pretty good. However, as we venture into the future, I worry that this list will grow out of control, especially when you have equally as graphically impressive games like God of War running absolutely fantastically on the Steam Deck. Now, to be clear though, that is not the only way you can play the deck. If your goal is to just catch up on your decade-old library during your lunch breaks, I still think the Steam Deck is more than capable enough to run the vast library of supported PC games still. There is a plethora of excellent titles that released over the past couple of years that will run fantastically on the deck, and being able to play them basically almost anywhere you go is a huge plus and adds a lot of flexibility in game time. While my opinion on the Steam Deck hasn't really changed that much since last year, I wanted to make this video to showcase my biggest concern with the longevity of the platform coming up later into the year. I think at the moment, the Steam Deck should still be fine for most games, and with no successor at least in sight, you can be at least confident that you will get at least a year of good use out of it. But with the current landscape of a growing amount of questionably optimized games, it's getting quite a bit tougher to recommend as a primary gaming device in my opinion. Especially now with Z1 Extreme devices dropping in price to be almost comparable to the Deck's pricing. For those looking to play more demanding titles, something like the ROG Ally in the current landscape in my opinion would be a much better choice despite the shortcomings. Either way though, the Steam Deck in 2025 is still great value and is still worth picking up for those other reasons. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.